Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. I would like to extend a very special congratulations on behalf of all of us here at the Dark Wolf's Den Show to Brie Banage, the winner of the very first ever Golden Mandy from the International Mandela Effect Conference. If you guys are interested, go check that out on the IMEC YouTube page. But Brie Banage is a junior in high school who was selected to give a TEDx talk, and her topic she chose was the Mandela Effect. She gave an amazing talk on the Mandela Effect. If you haven't heard it already, it gave me chills, guys, and apparently it was good enough for the conference board to decide that she won the very first Golden Mandy Award that we've ever given over there. So if you're interested in that talk, it will be featured on imec.world. That is imec.world. So on behalf of all of us here at the Dark Wolf's Den Show, congratulations, Brie Banage, on that amazing win. Now let's get this party started, folks.
Unlocked and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner, is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner, is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Ripon Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
This is My Life DIY, and
hi, this is JoJo.
Hi, my name is Ash.
Hey everybody, it's AJ the Ripon Rabbit.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light.
And you're now listening
to Dark Wolf's Den.
The Dark Wolf's Den Show on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
Are ghosts real?
We had 1,000 hours of continuous communication with the spirit world.
Does time travel actually exist?
The laws of physics seem to be compatible with time machines.
You know, sometimes I wonder about reincarnation. Don't you?
A 4-year-old boy in Adelaide, Australia, has told his parents that he used to be Britain's Princess Diana.
What would happen if the world found out that aliens were real?
I didn't say disclosure would be easy, but what is the alternative?
To establish a space force as the 6th branch of the armed forces.
We have so many questions and yet so little time, so to have you here, the pleasure is all mine.
Coming to you from a secret mountain cave, hidden deep within the Idaho wilderness. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and we are broadcasting live across the multiverse from a secret cave, hidden high up in the beautifully snow-covered peaks of the Idaho mountains. That's right. We're ripping through the electromagnetic soup, tearing through the atmosphere, and tunneling away into your radio like a quantum particle. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Wednesday, April 28th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be digging into a philosophical topic. But don't worry, it does definitely match up with the paranormal. See, I've always had this theory that the paranormal and philosophy go hand in hand, and tonight's episode is one of those reasons why I have that theory. That's right, we're going to be discussing free will versus determinism. Are you free? Do you have free will to do the things that you choose to do? Or are all those choices predetermined? I don't know, but we're going to discuss it tonight. Wednesday, April 28th, 2021, on the Dark Wolf's Den Show. But first, congratulations to Michael Fontaine being the first in the chat room tonight. I also see AJ the Ripon Rabbit over there, and looks like a number of our regulars over there tonight, so I appreciate every last one of you guys being here. And before we dig deep into this rabbit hole and dive into this topic, we've got one more thing to do. Today in history. This is probably the scariest today in history I'll ever have to do, because in my opinion, it was the scariest day in the history of the world. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, it is the 35th anniversary of the scariest day in history. On this day in 1986, world's worst nuclear disaster, that's right, the fourth reactor at Chernobyl nuclear power station in the USSR explodes. 31 die. Radioactive contamination reaches much of Western Europe. Luckily, it didn't turn out nowhere near as bad as it could have. But 35 years ago today was the scariest day in the history of mankind. And that is today's Today in History. And that is definitely one of the scariest days in the history of the world, if not the scariest, in my opinion. And speaking of scary, it's really scary to think that we don't have free will, right? But do we have free will? We're going to be discussing that all weekend long. Well, tonight and tomorrow night's shows are going to be revolving around this discussion of free will versus determinism, because there's a lot that goes into this discussion. This is a debate that has been raging for centuries easily. And I'd say as long as mankind has been able to converse, I think we've been asking this question: are we choosing things of our own free will, or are things chosen for us without our knowledge? I mean, we say it all the time, don't we? It was meant to be. I was in the right place at the right time. It's like everything was determined, right? But we don't know. We like to think we have free will. We like to think that everything we choose is a choice of our own. But is it really?
Are we free? I mean, on the one hand, most of us have the clear sense that we are. We feel free. We feel like we make all sorts of decisions that lead to both beliefs and actions that are wholly of our own choosing, like, I could do that. I had oatmeal this morning because I felt like it. This view that humans are capable of entirely free actions is known as libertarian free will.
And let's be real clear here. When they say libertarian, we are not speaking of a political designation. Not in this case.
Both views get their name from the word liberty, but political libertarians are all about freedom from government intervention, while people who accept libertarian free will could be anything from political libertarians to socialists. They just think that metaphysically we can act freely.
And of course, this is the camp that we would all like to find ourselves in, right? We would all like to believe that we have free will. However, there's been moments in my life that I'll discuss here in a moment that really make me think that may not be the case. That there may be certain things in reality that are predetermined. Maybe all of reality is predetermined. What do you guys think? Go ahead and put a 1 in the chat room if you really think that everything is your own free will. You chose to come here tonight. You chose to do everything you do freely of your own choice. Or put a 2 if you don't believe we have free will and we have determinism. Put a 3 in the chat room if you're on the fence and you're not really sure about either side.
So a lot of us figure that our thoughts and actions are free, but most of us also believe that every effect has a cause and that everything that happens now in the present is the necessary result of events that occurred in the past. This view is known as hard determinism, and many of the people watching this probably think that they believe in both things, that many of your actions are free and that the world is governed by cause and effect.
And if you chose 3, it sounds like you are in the majority, because it looks to me like people try to believe both things at the same time. I don't know how this doesn't cause a cognitive dissonance, right? Probably also why this conversation's been going on for centuries already. But in all seriousness, it really does make you wonder which one, if any, is the correct answer. Or could they both be correct?
But it turns out you can't rationally hold both views.
Well, I guess the answer to my last question would be no. They could not be both correct at the same time.
Traditionally, libertarians have defined free actions according to what's known as the principle of alternate possibilities. That might sound like a plot device for a sci-fi show, but this principle says that an action is free only if the agent, that is the person doing the thing, could have done otherwise. So truly free actions require options.
I would say I'd agree with that definition. To have free will, you have to have something to choose from, right? To have a choice, you have to have something to choose from, an A and a B, an option A to do this or option B to do that. Either I'm going to get up and go take a jog, or I'm going to sit here and talk to you guys, right? It could be either way. But I have both options on the table. At least I feel like I have both options on the table, right?
Determinism, by contrast, doesn't allow options. It holds that every event is caused by a previous event, which means that an agent can never have done anything other than what they did, and therefore they are never free.
A moment ago, we said that if there's choices, then it's free will. You've got the choice to do A or B, this or that, right? However, I don't think choice is always as it seems. I think a lot of times we may be looking at the illusion of choice, even when it comes to something in fated reality itself. Check this out. So, I was planning the first International Mandela Effect Conference, and I was doing this out of my own pocket at the time, all out of my own pocket, and I was to the point where I had a surplus of money in my account that I didn't have planned to use for anything as far as the conference went. So I said, okay, I decided I wanted to do something that I had to go to another town to do. And I think I have told the story on the air before, but if you have heard it, forgive me and bear with me. For those that haven't, I did my best to do what I wanted to do out of town. However, every time it got to the point where it was time to go, the driver, because I don't drive, I had to rely on a friend of mine to drive. The driver had an issue come up. Now, it isn't something like the guy was trying to avoid it. Don't get me wrong. I know the guy personally. It was a really weird set of coincidences, if you want to call it that. As you guys know, we call that a bad word on this show. But anyway, I was trying to go out of town with this friend of mine and go do something that I wanted to do. And when it come time to do it, the first time he had something come up, and then the second time something came up, and this happened 5 times in a row to the point it was almost ridiculous. And the last time the car broke altogether, and we haven't been able to go anywhere since in that car. So it's really strange that fate stopped me at every turn, because I ended up needing that money unknowingly later for that very same International Mandela Effect Conference. Thank God it didn't let me do it, but how much free will did I have in this situation? I chose that I wanted to go out of town and do something. I chose a driver. I lined everything up, everything getting ready to go, everything timed, planned, ready to do it. And 5 times, fate stopped me from doing what I was trying to do. And for a necessary reason, but it stopped me from being able to do it. How much free will did I have in this case? And remember this story, because we will be bringing it back up again tomorrow night and making a point off it once again. But my point here is, how much free will did I have in this situation? I had enough free will to choose that I wanted to do something, but how much free will did I have in whether or not it actually occurred, right? Every time it come time to do it, fate said, no, you're not going to do this. And every time I tried again, fate stopped and did not allow it to happen. And I say fate very broadly because that's the only word I know to use for it. Predeterminism, whatever word you would like to put there. It said, no, I was not allowed to make these actions that I willfully wanted to make of my own free will, what I thought was my own free will, that got thwarted by reality itself. So, I mean, at that point, I started questioning, what is free will versus predeterminism? How much of the world is predetermined? Is all of the world predetermined? And of course, like I said, this is an argument that's been going back since the beginning of time.
But let's look at these two options more closely, and also, let's look at my breakfast. Libertarianism says that my decision to eat oatmeal this morning wasn't necessarily caused by anything that happened before it. Instead, it could have been the result of non-physical events, specifically my own thoughts that originated right at that point. I ate oatmeal because I decided to eat oatmeal. End of story.
And I think most people would still agree with that statement, correct?
But libertarianism runs counter to what we know about the workings of the physical world, with one thing causing another. So libertarians need a way to account for their view. One way they do that is by making a distinction between what's known as event causation and agent causation. Event causation means that no physical event can occur without having been caused by a previous physical event. So many libertarians concede that the physical world itself is deterministic, like a baseball is flying through the air because someone hit that ball with a bat.
So according to this, no matter what I wanted to do, different decisions pre-made in the life of the driver happened to lead up to the actions that occurred along the way that disallowed this to happen. It was all predetermined because of cause and effect of things that were out of my hands still, but cause and effect to the effect of the person that would have been driving me that would have made this possible. So, according to the theory here, and with the example we're using, that would be the case. But it still begs to question, how much of my free will did I get to exercise?
But many libertarians also argue that there's such a thing as agent causation, which says that an agent, a being propelled by a mind, can start a whole chain of causality that wasn't caused by anything else. So the person who hit the ball most likely did so because they just decided to do it. By this logic, agents have the ability to affect the causal chain of the universe. They can make stuff happen on their own.
I would reference the butterfly effect to the point a butterfly decides to flap its wings in Asia and a hurricane brews in North America. So, I mean, this is the idea here anyway. That because the decision was made, it led to a series of decisions that wouldn't have been made before this particular decision was made. It led down a different timeline, if you will.
But many philosophers find this idea untenable. Where would these free decisions, the ones that launch entirely new causal chains, come from, they ask? Are they simply random? What would compel an agent to make one decision and not another?
Which are all extremely valid questions. I guess the argument could be posed, what causes a person to make one decision over another, or do we even make decisions once again, right?
And if you can answer those questions, if you can explain what would cause an agent to act, then, well, you've just reinforced the position that actions are caused rather than free.
So that's kind of paradoxical, huh? By proving free will, I would automatically disprove free will.
The fact is, it's pretty difficult to find arguments that support libertarian free will. The best argument in favor of it seems to be that it just feels an awful lot like we're free. And libertarians argue that we shouldn't discount the legitimacy of our own personal subjective experiences. So if we feel so free, we should seriously consider the possibility that we are. That point has a certain intuitive appeal, but if you can't come up with an argument to defend your feeling, then good philosophical reasoning recommends that you reject it, or at least withhold judgment until you can get some evidence together.
So our own subjective experiences enough to prove that it is really free will, free choice? Or is it just an illusion of choice, like in my particular case? And I still stand by, I had the illusion of free choice because when I went to act upon my free will, I was stopped every time.
So now, let's see if the hard determinists can do any better. 18th century French philosopher Baron d'Holbach said that none of our actions are actually free. D'Holbach believed that everything that's happening right now is the result of an unbroken chain of events. Everything, he said, is the inevitable result of what came before, including everything that we do. Our actions are caused in the same way that, say, home runs are caused by bats hitting balls, or tornadoes are caused by warm air systems hitting cool air systems in the right conditions. This means that humans and our actions are just part of the physical world, bound by its physical laws. This belief is often explained through a view known as reductionism. Reductionism is the view that all parts of the world and of our own experience can be traced back or reduced down to one singular thing. So,
another dogmatism of science that I do not adhere to, as you guys know. I wholly disagree with this concept that everything can be reduced down to a molecule or a particle or anything of that nature. I suggest that there's much more spiritual going on than it can be reduced down to a particle that can be seen in the real world. That is, of course, my opinion, and I've argued it many, many times on this show. So as much as I hate to admit that I disagree with these guys, I have at this point in my journey to say I kind of do disagree with these guys. I wonder if we have free will.
For example, you see your mind as being capable of making free decisions. You think that what goes on in your head when you make a choice is not at all like bats and balls. But, well, mental states are brain states, or at least they're directly tied to your brain, and brain states are biological. And biological states are physical states. And the physical world, as we already said, is deterministic. There's just no room for free will in this picture. We think we're free, But we're not. And really, as scientific thinkers, why would we assume that we are? Why would we think that we're any different than everything else in the universe?
I don't think it'd be an invalid assumption because, we do feel free, right? Don't we feel like everything around us is our free choice? I don't think it would be a ridiculous assumption to think that we would be different than everything else in the universe, as he put it, that we would have a bit of free will to us, right?
Libertarians are right that it's really hard to disregard the feeling of freedom. If I didn't choose to eat oatmeal this morning, why do I feel like I did? And what made me do it?
Well, that's a pretty valid point, too, because what kind of cause and effect went into it? Did you said to eat oatmeal because that's all you could afford? Or that was the only thing the store had? Or what cause and effect factors led up to only having oatmeal as the decision, right? Was it a free will choice? Or was it a predetermined choice that no matter what, at that point, you were going to eat oatmeal? I don't know.
Hard determinists argue that just because we can't pinpoint the exact factors that led us to an action, we could, in theory, isolate them if we knew enough about all of the beliefs, desires, and temperaments swirling around in our brains. So in this view, what we call decisions are really just the inevitable results of a bunch of mental stuff combining in just the right way. And maybe it feels free, but it's not.
It seems the more deeply we get into this rabbit hole, the more paradoxical it becomes, right? Because I know I feel free. I know I feel like I have the free choice whether or not to sit here and do the rest of the show with you guys or to just get up, walk out of the studio right now and leave it with dead air. I have both choices. I guess in the other example, I had the choice to walk to where I wanted to go. Although, let's be honest, that's a ridiculous choice with the amount of distance that would have been needed for me to walk. So, not impossible, but given today's world, it's not something that I would have chosen at first. So, do I still have the choices? Did I still have free will then? I had another choice. As ridiculous as the other choice was, I still had another choice. So maybe that is free will, right? It is what we experience as far as our subjective experience goes. We truly feel like we have free will.
But hold up, isn't there some way out of this? Like, what if I have someone choose my breakfast for me? Or what if I fall back on randomness by, flipping a coin? After all, if I just flipped a coin, then it wouldn't look like that decision was made by beliefs, desires, and temperaments.
Okay, there we go. We introduced randomness into the situation. That should fix the issue, right? That should prove we have a free will choice, right?
Well, no such luck, because even if I thought I chose randomly, my decision to flip the coin or who I asked to pick for me was just as determined as everything else.
We know that the ancient Greeks and Romans didn't believe that much in free will because they believed the gods controlled everything, right? That everything was fated. It was meant to be, once again. And of course, modern-day Christians will tell you they believe in free will, yet they will also tell you that God is in charge of everything and God is responsible for what happens on earth. So even they have a very strong belief system in things being predetermined or fated by the God. So it's not much different than the ancient systems, right? Like the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks and different civilizations like that, right? And we've got things like the oracle. And it makes you wonder with psychics. If psychic phenomena is real, which I do believe it is, would that default to determinism and it not be free will? I mean, how can it be free will if everything's predetermined through a psychic vision that this is how it's going to happen? Or prophecies, right? Prophecies are another one. How can a prophecy come true if it hasn't been predetermined to come true in reality? And that kind of negates any free will, doesn't it?
Let's say, for the sake of argument, that you love your father, by which I mean you want him to be alive. And let's also assume that you don't have any attachments to your mother that you might describe as romantic. Well, guess who thought he felt the same way about his parents? Oedipus. According to ancient Greek legend, when Oedipus was born, a prophecy foretold that he would kill his father and marry his mother. mother. So, in an act of colossally bad decision-making, his father left baby Oedipus in the wilderness, assuming he would die, and the prophecy would then not come true. But instead, the abandoned baby was discovered and raised by another family. As an adult, Oedipus learned of the prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother. So, not knowing he was adopted, he left his adoptive parents in order to avoid fulfilling that prophecy, figuring that if he wasn't near them, it couldn't come true. Lo and behold, as he was trying to flee his fate, Oedipus killed a stranger in a fit of rage who turned out to be the father he had never met. He then proceeded to marry the dead man's widow, who was actually his mother, though he didn't know it. Needless to say, this is a fate that any of us would like to avoid. But for philosophers, the whole point of the story of Oedipus is there is no escaping fate.
And most of us believe in the mark of the beast and Revelation and different things from the Bible, right? But remember, that's prophecy. That's all prophesied from back then to happen in the future. So if it's prophesied to happen, does that mean that it's going to happen no matter what? No matter, regardless of the lines taken, does that mean that because it's prophesied to happen, that it is written in stone that it is going to happen? Doesn't that mean it's predetermined to happen regardless of the situation? That's kind of what it sounds like to me. So does the Bible say that we don't have free will then? But that's not true, because we'd have to have free will in order to make choices whether to sin or not. So the Bible does suggest we have free will. But then again, do we really? Let's look at DNA. How are we affected by our DNA? Our DNA is individual to each of us. So what does our individual DNA have to do with the decisions that we make each day? We know that it's how our bodies are structured, how our brains are built, how our consciousness is interpreted through our brain is all based on our DNA structures. So how much does DNA play into our decisions in everyday life? The restrictions put on us by our individual DNA, or the restrictions that aren't put on some of us by our individual DNA. How does that make any difference? We're going to dig so much deeper into the next level in the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show, ladies and gentlemen, and we will be right back with that second half after these messages. You sit right there and we'll be right back. Don't you touch that dial. That's right.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Oh yeah, that howl means your weekend has begun. Hi everyone, it's AJ the Ripon Rabbit. Are you enjoying tonight's Dark Wolf's Den show? If you are and you haven't done so already, please make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell. You'll get our notifications every time we go live. We're here every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, bringing you the very best of common sense radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole. Jerry Hicks and the Dark Wolf's Den will return again tomorrow night, April 29th, Thursday, for a look at time-locked events. That's right, join Jerry and the Dark Wolf's Den show tomorrow night, April 29th, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, and journey along through the den of time-locked events. I'm excited. I can't wait to see what time-locked events he unlocks. Then Friday, April 30th, I'll return with a look at science. Now, this was supposed to happen last Sunday, as the schedule was supposed to happen. I can tell you this, it's not happening, folks. You're not getting a schedule on our road trip because Nikki Rabbit and I are still out on the road. We've gone beyond Route 66. We are out here in the wild, wild east, if you know what I mean. And I can tell you, there is no schedule. I can't even think about putting it together. I really can't, but I can tell you Friday, April 29th, we're going to, April 30th, Friday, we're going to deal with science. April 31st, Saturday, vaudeville, that's right. And May 1st, the first Sunday of the month, is going to be an experiment with the Fantastic Fun Show. That's right. It's going to be fun. This weekend, May 1st. Can you believe it? Champion Sports Nation has already bowed out of the competition, and I can tell you this, we have an exciting new game to play with you. And Nikki and I and Eugene have been crossing the nation. We've been preparing the Fantastic Fun Show for you. And Eugene is on the road trip, I can tell you that much. It's going to be an exciting night as we end out the weekend right together with experiments on Sunday night. The Fantastic Fun Show continues. We'll return to tonight's topic for Wednesday, April 28th, the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Free will versus determinism. You're listening to the Ripon Common Sense Radio Network. The Ripon Rabbit Hole.
This is My Life DIY, and
Hi, this is JoJo. Hi, my name is Oz.
Hey everybody, it's AJ the Ripon Rabbit.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light.
And you're now listening
to Dark Wolf's Den.
The Dark Wolf's Den Show on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. And welcome back to the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Wednesday, April 28th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. If you're just tuning in tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing free will versus determinism. This is a debate that has been raging for a very, very long time. I doubt we will get to the bottom of it by the end of the episode, but I promise that we will learn something, at least along the way, right? And, you know, in the first half we discussed the back and forth between the concept of libertarian free will and hard determinism. So, with both of these concepts now understood, let's see what the greatest minds of today have to say on this topic. First up, we have philosopher Daniel Dennett.
For billions of years on this planet, there was life but no free will. Physics hasn't changed, but now we have free will. The difference is not in physics. It has to do with, ultimately, with biology, particularly evolutionary biology. What has happened over those billions of years is that greater and greater competences have been designed and have evolved. And the competence of a dolphin or of a chimpanzee, the cognitive competence, the sort of mental competence, is hugely superior to the competence of, a lobster or a starfish. But ours dwarfs the competence of a dolphin or a chimpanzee, perhaps even greater extent. And there's an entirely naturalistic story to tell about how we came to have that competence or those competences. And it's that can-do, it's that power that we have, which is natural, but it's that power which sets us aside from every other species.
Can you be more specific, Mr. Dennett? What kind of power are we talking about here?
And the key to it is that we don't just act for reasons, we represent our reasons to ourselves and to others. The business of asking somebody, why did you do that? and the person being able to answer. It is the key to responsibility.
You mean having enough cognition to be responsible?
In fact, the word responsibility sort of wears its meaning on its sleeve. We are responsible because we can respond to challenges to our reasons. Why? Because we don't just act for reasons, we act for reasons that we consciously represent to ourselves. And this is what gives us the power and the obligation to think ahead, to anticipate, to see the consequences of our action, to be able to evaluate those consequences in the light of what other people tell us, to share our wisdom with each other. No other species can do anything like it. And it's because we can share our wisdom that we have a special responsibility. That's what makes us free in a way that no bird is free, for instance.
Not just the fact that we have a responsibility, but the fact that we're able to execute it and defend ourselves when someone asks, well, why did you do that? We have a cognitive reason that we can give them. But does that not go back to the argument of cause and effect, right? We did this, I did this because of that. So once again, it goes right back to the cause and effect argument, huh? Psychologist Steven Pinker, what do you think about the topic? Do we have free will, or is it all determinism?
I don't believe there's such a thing as free will in the sense of a ghost in the machine, a spirit or soul that somehow reads the TV screen of the senses and pushes buttons and pulls levers of behavior.
Now, here's where Jerry's cognitive dissonance really starts to set in. Because as I said in the first half, I really don't know about the free will versus determinism. Because I was very free will, and then I've had a couple things happen, and I wonder if it's determinism, but then I look at it again and wonder, well, it could have been free will, though the choices weren't ones I liked, they were still available. So, I mean, I can go back and forth on this free will versus determinism thing, but I definitely do believe that we all have a soul, right? I know most of you would agree with that, and along those lines, it would be that soul nature that would be making these decisions, your higher self, if you were, as some call it. Whatever reference you want to use, I personally believe that there is a soul that does interact with the body, that helps to enact the free will as a conscious agent, if you will. What do you think, Stephen?
There's no sense that we can make of that.
Okay, then, if that's not making any sense, what makes sense to you, sir?
I think our behavior is the product of physical processes in the brain. On the other hand, when you have a brain that consists of 100 billion neurons connected by 100 trillion synapses,
right,
there is a vast amount of complexity that means that human choices will not be predictable in any simple way from the stimuli that have impinged on it beforehand.
But does that mean they're not predictable at all?
We also know that that brain is set up so that there are at least two kinds of behavior. There's what happens when I shine a light in your eye and your iris contracts, or I hit your knee with a hammer and your leg jerks upward. We also know that there's a part of the brain that does things like choose what to have for dinner, whether to order chocolate or vanilla ice cream, how to move the next chess piece, whether to pick up the paper or put it down. That is very different from your iris closing when I shine a light in your eye. That second kind of behavior, one that engages vast amounts of the brain, particularly the frontal lobes, that incorporates an enormous amount of information in the causation of the behavior, that has some mental model of the world that can predict the consequences of possible behavior and select them on the basis of those consequences.
Okay, so that's fair enough. Our brain makes snap decisions based on the known consequences of whatever decisions are presented in front of us. So could that mean there is no free will? We've heard from a philosopher in the second half so far, and we've heard from a psychologist in the second half so far. But what does theoretical physics, or physics itself, what does physics have to say about the debate of determinism versus free will. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, one of my personal heroes, Dr. Michio Kaku. Dr. Kaku, what does physics say about free will?
Well, you asked one of the deepest philosophical questions of physics, the question of free will.
It also happens to be a huge question in the realm of the paranormal, believe it or not. So I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this, Doc.
First of all, there's something called Newtonian Determinism.
And for those in the audience that don't know what Newtonian Determinism is, could you explain that for us real quick?
Newtonian Determinism says that the universe is a clock, a gigantic clock that's wound up at the beginning of time, and it's been ticking ever since according to Newton's laws of motion. So, what you're going to eat 10 years from now, on January 1st, has already been fixed. It's already known using Newton's laws of motion. Einstein believed in that. Einstein was a determinist.
So there's a problem. If Newton is right, this brings up a bit of a moral dilemma, right?
And some people asked Einstein, well, does that mean that a murderer, a horrible mass murderer, isn't really guilty of his works because it was already preordained billions of years ago?
Now, there's something I would not have thought to have taken into account. Would a person like that be guilty? If it's predetermined, could we even apply guilt to them at that point? Or is it just kind of moot because it was all meant to be to begin with? What do you guys think? Do you guys think that it's that the person's guilty, that the wrong should be punished? Or do you think they should just be let go because, well, it wasn't their fault anyway. They were predetermined to do it. It was going to happen no matter what, right?
And Einstein said, well, yeah, in some sense that's true. That even mass murderers were predetermined. But he said they should still be placed in jail. Okay?
I have to say I agree with Einstein on that one. They should still be placed in jail. What about you guys? I don't think any one of you would suggest any different, right?
Heisenberg then comes along and proposes the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and says, nonsense. There's uncertainty. You don't know where the electron is. It could be here, here, or many places simultaneously. And this, of course, Einstein hated because he said God doesn't play dice with the universe.
As you guys know, one of my favorite historical anecdotes that I've repeated on this show a number of times.
Well, hey, get used to it. Einstein was wrong. God does play dice. Every time we look at an electron, it moves. There's uncertainty with regards to the position of the electron. So what does that mean for free will?
So if the Heisenberg uncertainty principle says there's uncertainty in the system and there's no telling where the electron is, which definitely could affect whatever the next outcome would be, then following that to its logical conclusion, it would suggest that
it means in some sense we do have some kind of free will, in the sense that no one can determine your future events given your past history.
So I order from a local restaurant quite a bit, and I order usually the exact same thing, to the point they've named this item after me, right? So when I call and I decide one day that I want to have a turkey club, it flips them out because it's out of the random. It's in uncertainty. They were certain they knew what my order was. It's been the same thing for 2 weeks, and now I'm ordering something different. The uncertainty always remains. Perhaps I would have the taste for Alfredo one day, or a club, or whatever the item may be. It wouldn't be the item that I normally always get. There's that uncertainty there. You want to break up the monotony. You want to do something different. And as humans, we really do have a bit of spontaneity to us, don't we? At least we feel that we do, right?
There's always the wild card. There's always the possibility of uncertainty in whatever we do. So this means that free will, determining the future, hey, these are philosophical questions that seem to indicate that we have some kind of free will.
So does the very act of having the ability to question free will mean that we have the free will to ask the question, about free will? That's a bit of a circular thought, isn't it? It's going to make my head hurt. I stay there too long. Yeah, don't stick around on that thought. You will get stuck in a circle. It might hurt after a while. But in all seriousness, guys, it also brings up another question, this debate of free will versus determinism, right? Is it right is it ethically right to tell someone that they don't have free will? Could that lead to a negative consequence? Well, at least one philosopher thinks that may very well be the case. Mr. Dennett, walk us through this concept of the moral question of free will versus determinism, and explain to us this word that you use from time to time called an intuition pump. I've never heard that.
Intuition pumps are sometimes called thought experiments. More often they're called thought experiments, but they're not really formal arguments. Typically they're stories, they're little fables. In fact, I think they're similar to Aesop's fables in that they're supposed to have a moral. They're supposed to teach us something. And what they do is they lead the audience to an intuition, a conclusion, where you sort of pound your fist on the table and you say, oh yeah, it's got to be that way, doesn't it? And if it achieves that, then it's pumped the intuition it was designed to pump. These are persuasion machines. Little persuasion machines that philosophers have been using for several thousand years.
So can you give us a good example of an intuition pump, Mr. Dennett?
One of my recent favorites, which I devised to jangle the nerves of neuroscientists who've been going around saying that neuroscience shows that we don't have free will.
Okay, now you really have my attention, because on this show, and for those that don't, I really rail against the idea of consciousness and everything being in the brain. So neuroscience and I don't tend to get along very well due to the dogmatism therein. So, Mr. Dennett, you've got my attention. Go ahead.
I think their reasons for saying that are ill-considered, and moreover, that what they're doing is apt to be mischievous and doing some real harm.
Well, how in the world could just stating that a person doesn't have free will do harm? Could this be morally wrong?
So I concocted a little thought experiment, a little intuition pump, to suggest that. So this is the case of the nefarious neurosurgeon.
Okay, guys, you ready? Let's play along with this intuition pump and see where we end up on the other side. Gotta say, I'm kind of excited about this. I love moral, ethical questions, but that's a whole nother show.
Who treats a patient who has obsessive compulsive disorder by inserting a little microchip in his brain, which controls the OCD, the obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, there is such a chip. It's been developed in the Netherlands, and it works really quite well. That's science fact, but now here comes science fiction.
Okay, so our case study so far in this intuition pump, our main character has OCD and has now had a chip put in his brain to control or help control the OCD.
So the neurosurgeon, after she's operated on the guy, sewed him all up. So, okay, your OCD is under control now. You'll be happy to learn. But moreover, our team here will be monitoring you 24/7, and we're going to be controlling everything you do from now on. You'll think you have free will. You'll think you're making your own decisions, but really you won't have free will at all. Free will is an illusion that we will maintain while controlling you. Goodbye. Have a nice life. Sends him out the door. Well, he believes her. She had a shiny lab and lots of degrees and diplomas and all that. So what does he do? Well, thinking he doesn't have free will anymore, he gets a little self-indulgent, a little bit aggressive, a little negligent in how he decides what to do. And pretty soon, by indulging some of his worst features, he's got himself in trouble with the law. And he's arrested and he's put on trial. And at the trial, he says, "But Your Honor, I don't have free will. I'm under the control of the team at the neurosurgery clinic." I say, "What's this?" And they call the neurosurgeon to the stand. They said, "Did you tell this man that you were controlling his every move? He didn't have free will?" She says, yeah, I did, yeah. But I was just messing with his head. That was just a joke. I didn't think he'd believe me. Now, right there, I think we can stop, take a deep breath, and say, well, she did something really bad. That was really, she really harmed that man. In fact, her little joke telling him that actually accomplished non-surgically pretty much what she claimed to accomplish surgically. She disabled him. By telling him he didn't have free will, she pretty much turned his free will off and turned him into a morally incompetent person. Now, if we agree that she did a bad thing, if nobody recommends people play jokes like this,
and I highly recommend, if you're ever in that position, not playing a joke like that.
What are we to say about the neuroscientists who are telling the public every day, we've shown in our neuroscience labs that nobody has free will? I think if the neuroscientists recognize that what my imaginary neurosurgeon did was irresponsible, they should think seriously about whether it's irresponsible of them to make these claims about free will. And it's not just a fantasy. Vos and Schooler, in an important paper which has been replicated in several different ways, set up an experiment really to test this.
What kind of experiment, Mr. Dennett?
With college students who were given two texts to read. One was a text, they were both from Francis Crick's book, The Astonishing Hypothesis, and one was not about free will, and the other was about free will, and basically it said, free will is an illusion. All your decisions are actually determined by causes that neuroscience is investigating. You don't have free will, that's just an illusion. All right, so we have two groups, the group that read that passage and the group that read another passage from that book of the same length. After they've read the passage, they are given a puzzle to solve where they can earn some money by solving it. And the experimenters cleverly made the puzzle slightly defective, so there was a way of cheating on the puzzle that was, inadvertently revealed to the subjects.
So was there any difference between the two groups of people, those had read the two different passages, and the reactions they had within this game to win money, knowing that they could cheat if they wanted to?
The subjects who'd read the passage where Crick says free will is an illusion cheated at a much higher rate than the other ones. In other words, just reading that passage did have the effect of making them less concerned about the implications of their action, and just they became, as it were, negligent or worse in their own decision making.
So what do you guys think? Is that actually dangerous to suggest that we don't have free will? For neuroscientists to come out and say, oh, we couldn't find a particle to prove free will, so you don't have free will, everything is predetermined. Or should we trust our senses and what we feel and what we see? And do we feel that we're freely making free will decisions of our own cognizance? What do you guys think? Do you guys think that it is a free will reality, that we each have the free will, the ability to manifest things in our life, the free will to choose what we want, when we want, where we want, how we want, so on and so forth? Or are we bound by different ideas, different concepts, different realities of reality, from DNA to our social structure? Are there certain things, causes and effect, that bind us to the reality that we're going to be stuck in no matter what? Nature versus nurture, right? Can we rise above where we're at? Do we have the free will ability to get further than where we are? Do we have the ability to truly exercise free will? Or is everything predetermined? We're going to pick up on this again tomorrow night when we cover time-locked events and see that this rabbit hole goes twice as deep as we ever thought it would. But what do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Because in the end, all you can do is look at the evidence. apply a little common sense, and when it comes down to it, you be the judge. We got to close it out. That's right, that's it for this episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Wednesday, April 28th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the Den may be closing for this evening, but don't you worry, the weekend fun has only just begun. That's right, because I will be back tomorrow, Thursday, April 29th, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, for an all-new episode of the Dark Wolf's Den radio show. That's right, tomorrow night, we're going to carry on and pick up our discussion on free will and determinism with the idea that maybe both can exist simultaneously, and that may be possible by something that I've come up with, a concept called time-locked events. It's a concept I've been working on for a couple years, and hopefully I've got it together enough to present it to you guys tomorrow night and make it make some kind of sense, right? Let's only cross our fingers and hope. And once that show's over, that's not the end of the weekend, ladies and gentlemen. That means the weekend has kicked off right, because on Friday, April 30th, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, our buddy AJ the Ripon Rabbit will be taken to the airwaves with an all-new episode of the Ripon Rabbit Hole Live Show. That's right. If you guys tuned in Sunday, we do apologize for the issues that we had, unable to be on the air with the live show on Sunday. So because we weren't able to get to that show, he's going to pick up the topic of science on Friday, April 30th, 2021. And this isn't just going to be a discussion of science. This is going to be an award show, if you will. You guys remember a couple weeks ago, AJ the Ripon Rabbit was part of judging a science fair. Well, we're going to hear about the winners of that science fair on Friday, April 30th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Then on Saturday, May 1st, 2021, also 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. All shows here on the network are 7 p.m. Pacific and 10/9 Central. He's going to be talking on Saturday about vaudeville. What is vaudeville, right? Well, do you like comedy? I personally love a good comedy, right? Well, if you like comedy, you're going to love this show on Saturday. It is definitely going to be a very, very fun experience here on the network. So make sure you tune in for discussion on vaudeville and find out what is hilariously amazing about this topic. Then on Sunday, May 2nd, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, AJ the Ripon Rabbit's going to come to the airwaves one more time with one more episode of the Ripon Rabbit Hole Live Show around the weekend. All right, that's right. AJ on Sunday will be talking about experiments. If there's one thing AJ loves, I know if you guys have tuned in for any amount of time, you know he loves his on-air experiments. And I'm sure he's going to be salivating at the glands over discussing the multitude of experiments that he'll be discussing on Sunday, from the scientific method, I'm sure, to the depth of experiments. I can't wait myself to find out what amazing information he has hidden away that he'll bring out on Sunday, May 2nd, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, on the Ripon Rabbit Hole Live Show right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio Network and the RiponRabbitHole.com. Speaking of the RiponRabbitHole.com, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already, make sure you go over there and sign up for your Backstage Pass. That's right. This is going to give you access to the entire rest of the site, and there's a lot of fun goodies on this site. Like what? Well, then we've got the Down the Rabbit Hole section. That is our exclusive social media network over there, as well as the 24/7 Backstage Lounge, my favorite place to hang out. Come on over and hang out with the rabbits back there, and we have all kinds of amazing discussions, from Mandela Effect to you name it, the paranormal, free will. I've had a lot of discussions back there with my buddy Nachiketa on free will versus determinism. We go really, really deep on this topic a lot, so it's really fun being able to present this to you guys tonight, and it comes out of the Backstage Lounge. A lot of this conversation comes out of there, so if you want to add to the conversation, come on over to the 24/7 Backstage Lounge on RiponRabbitHole.com. That is RiponRabbitHole.com. That's right. So much fun over there, like our groups section. If you haven't checked them out already, there's a large variety of groups, again, from the Mandela Effect to the Dark Wolf's Den Show group over there, and the Ripon Rabbit Hole live show group, the Community Rabbit Players. By the way, I have sent a message to the community players over there, guys. If you're part of the community players, go ahead and check those messages. We're going to try to put together a new show. Not a new weekly show, but a new play for the rabbits. You guys don't know the Rabbit Players, the Rabbit Hole Players. We're a group of artists and theatrical artists that come together every now and then, and we do radio plays for you guys, and bring the old school radio kind of back into the modern age. So Rabbit Hole Players, make sure you check over there, and let's see if we can't get something going for our next show, ladies and gentlemen, our next Rabbit Hole Players show. Go and join that group if you want to be a part of that. You can also join us here on the air when we do that. Join that group and see if we can't get you in there, as well as a number of amazing groups over there. So no matter what you're into, they've got it. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to get out of here. It's been an honor and a pleasure hanging out with you guys tonight. So on behalf of our producer, AJ the Ripon Rabbit, as well as Walt House, Chick Mandela Effect, Michael Musco, everybody involved at Ripon Common Sense Radio, as well as Tom Bayless and Red Shed Studios for the amazing music we use. On behalf of all of these folks, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. And remember, until next time, stay awake, but dare to dream. Good night, everybody. How? Yeah. That's right.
Unlocked and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner. Is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner. Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a